Hello and welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates. If you've been following me for the last 30 days, it seems, I have just one question for you. Have you made a decision yet? I mean, there's no movie, right? Even these days, if you watch TV series, you can binge watch and you can watch an entire series, and or you can be like me, which I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. I watch most movies at 1.6, 1.7 times the speed. Sometimes it depends on the internet connection, but sometimes I'll watch it at 1.4, 1.5, like minimum 1.4, 1.5. That's comfortable for me. And then sometimes I skip certain parts, like fight scenes and stuff. It's like, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen. Ching, ching. They're just like, you know. So, wait, I'm not supposed to be encouraging you to watch these videos faster or skip parts. So if you've been watching this channel, if you've been following this playlist, which at the end will have 102 videos, because of course the first video was an introduction, then you will know that we've been talking about evaluating courses of action for a long time. And you remember the trip that we took, the checklist inside of the checklist inside of the checklist, which actually, to be honest, it was a checklist. So it was the state impact checklist as the foundation. It's like the first checklist. And then from there, the next layer is state teamwork and state drive. And then connected to state drive was state purposes. Now, interestingly, oopsie daisies. Interestingly, the evolution of the mind, as I've been reading this book for 6 years, and I've been working with people with this book for at least 3 years, 3 years already, 3 years, almost 3.5 years. Yeah, about 3 years. So, even from my experiences, I have, an evolution of how I think about these things and the experiences that I have as I talk to more and more people, especially now as I'm talking to people for almost 20 hours a week around business concepts, and at least 15 of those hours are using checklists. And because I'm working with the checklists at such a high density, so many hours per week, and working with so many different people, basically 2 new people each week, you start to find patterns, and I use the checklist in a certain way. So we've been going through this idea of the state impact checklist, and then the next layer is state teamwork and state drive. And then the third level was state purposes. But actually, I'm starting to think of after the 101 day challenge, what are some future packages, these dreams inside of dreams inside of dreams type experiences, but something that is aligned with some of the experiences that I'm having right now. And in general, I'm seeing 3 different types of experiences quite a bit. So one experience that I see a lot is management. So people who are managers, and they are managing 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. And they're not getting the results from people on their team. They're not getting the results that they would like. And so usually with these people, we start with the state drive checklist. So we've already gone through the state drive checklist. And you remember there's the vertical, which is increasing the diligence, more hours, more focus. And then there's the horizontal, which is increasing the successfulness, getting the results, finishing the work to a certain level of professionalism. All right. And then, so what I'm finding is with the diligence, like what are things you can do as a manager to improve, to increase, to motivate, then in that case, what we can do is we can then go into state styles. Now, why do we go to state styles? It's because when we talk about diligence, when we talk about the number of hours people are putting into a project, then what we can do is we can outline what are the things that people need to do. And then we can determine like what type of motivation. So then we can go from state drive to state styles. All right. So what kind of different work styles can they be working with in order to create processes? Because some of the time, like you're not getting the results you want because they're not motivated to do it because they don't understand how to do it, or the pieces aren't broken down. Like the work style doesn't match. They don't really know how to do it. And so you have to understand the different types of work styles in order to align the employee and to break down that job into a work style and then show them, okay, this work needs to be done this way. So let's discuss how we can do that work. So that's going to give them more diligence. It will also give them more successfulness. And then in addition, then we also talk about state purposes. So that's another checklist which is exactly focused on purposes, like looking at the internal purposes, helping to align your the people that you manage with their natural abilities, and also turning on these purposes within their own mind so that they start to become more autonomous. They take ownership, that they want to improve. They feel like they can improve. They feel like they want to put more hours because they can see that the result is something that they want. They want to do a better job. They want to figure out how to do this. So that's kind of like a package. Managers, they work with motivation. So drive, styles, and purposes. Then on the other end, I'm talking to like these guys who are like engineers, and they're not working with people, they're working with things. So they're mostly focusing on like operational agreements. And when you work with operational agreements, of course, you're talking about state teamwork, because like what are who are we? What are the outcomes we want? What are the reuses? What are the entity personas? Okay, this is like what we do. And then over here, it's what they do. And then this is how we support each other. These are the other actions that have to be done in order to complete this project. All right, so it's like an operational agreement, state teamwork. So in this case, we're not talking about motivating people, because in this case, we're usually talking about subcontractors, people who you're talking to the boss, and he's the guy who goes back to his team. When he goes back to his team, then he's a manager. He's managing people. But in terms of the operational agreement, he gets it done. In the face of like the agreement with working with the teams, when we put this together, it's an operational agreement. So then from there, then we can kind of break down some of the tasks, like specific tasks. And we can start talking about like state impact, what we're talking about today, about like, okay, so there's a certain decision that we need to make within this operational agreement, and how should we consider a variety of different scenarios. Or we can talk about state assumptions, all right? So like, do we need to do some more research before we can make this decision? Or what's the other one that I put in that column? There's one more that I put under that section. And state inventiveness. All right, so let's take when we're in this research process, then here's some different ways we can look at innovation in order to take some different perspectives. All right, so we start with state teamwork, and then next we're doing state impact, where we have to make a decision. But before we can make the decision, we have to remember we have to create those scenarios, which means that we need to start thinking about assumptions. And then as we make the assumptions, we can go even deeper by going into state inventiveness. All right, so you can see that there's these two parallel kind of, over here we're talking about motivation management, and over here we're talking about how to improve the planning process. So we start with the plan, and then we look in the plan, maybe we have to make a decision, and then as we make a decision, we have to look at those scenarios, and we have to do some research about those scenarios. And as we do the research, then we need to be more inventive and look at it from different perspectives. So you have these two different pillars of checklists that we're using. And then, then we have just some inventory. We just take some inventory, So like at the very beginning when we started talking, we were doing state progress, which is like, and state progress, as I've experienced people and as I've talked to people, often this is like, all right, so we need to create a program. So it's different than an operational agreement, right? An operational agreement, I know what I need to do, he knows what he needs to do, let's do it. Over here, we have motivation, which is like, I know what they need to be doing, and now I'm trying to get them to do it. And then in the middle, the state progress is like, okay, so I have a project, or I need to create some communications, and I need to have like the whole, like a framework of like, how do we shape the potential? And then like, what are the aims? What are the goals we're trying to reach? And then a plan that like helps us to use this potential to reach those aims. So those are kind of the three different scenarios that I'm working with the most. There's two other checklists, but I don't know, it's kind of rare that I'm using these other two, like state synergies, which we've gone through, and state resources, which we're going to go through at the end, like after we get through this checklist. I think basically going to be quite soon. I don't use them as much, but that's kind of the framework that I'm using these days. So I'm kind of thinking of like how I can create like 3 more playlists, and like one playlist is about this pillar, operational agreements, and working with other companies, managers, and working with staff, and then developing programs or projects. So that's what's up. I mean, today you're just making decisions, right? Like, what does it sound like I'm doing right now? I'm making decisions. I mean, I don't know where to go with this today, because today it's like step number 8. It says make decisions. So it says make decisions regarding to the extent to do the following. Analyze further. I'm sure nobody at this point is thinking they want to analyze further. Because, I mean, well, actually, like I had an experience today when I was talking to someone, and we were going through the state impact checklist. And the thing is, we only got to like choosing metrics. And then the thing is that as you start to list metrics, like what are the important things? What are the, because sometimes you like get overly emotional about certain types of decisions. And you get like, and one aspect of the decision seems to outweigh everything else because it's upsetting you. And that's why it's so important to choose metrics, because then you can kind of take a step back from like an engineering, not an emotional, but like an engineering, like let's build our lives. And so let's choose the metrics which are most important to us. And then once you have those metrics, then you can start to look at the differences between these different scenarios and say, oh, okay, well, if those, if this idea number 1, if this metric number 1 is so important, I wasn't even thinking about it because metric number 3 was just overshadowing the whole thing. So in that case, yeah, analyze further. If you're overly emotional about something, if you haven't thought through it yet, I mean, I guess sometimes people they just don't think through. It says here, use appropriate processes to select courses of action. And if you don't use appropriate processes, it's very likely that some aspect of your emotion could be influencing you to make a certain decision, which might not be the best decision in the long run. So, do you need to analyze further? Pursue various scenarios. All right, finally. So you make a decision, and what? You get to pursue various scenarios. It's time to start doing it. All right, so I was talking about like moving to Russia. I have got emails back from 2 universities, and the application process begins in June. And there's like some little things that like I'm not really excited about. Like because of the coronavirus, like I might have to fly back to Canada to apply for the visa to fly back to Russia. It's like I could walk to Russia. I'm in Belarus. And I literally have to fly all the way back to Canada and back again. It's going to cost like $2,000 to $3,000. I'm already here. Pursue various scenarios. And then the last one is broadcast findings. All right, so once you've made your decision, then it's time to broadcast the findings. Now, obviously, like, this is the thing about like using this process, because if you've gone through these steps, like step by step, one little step at a time, if you've done this like one little step at a time, then it's like much, much more easy to convince people, because if they have questions, you've thought through the answers already. You can say, well, based on this metric, this is the important result which we are trying to achieve. And based on this metric, we will be able to satisfy this principle. And based on this metric, you can actually like intelligently talk about your decision. And so that's why this checklist is often used to achieve buy-in, because you are actually going through the process of convincing yourself that you're making the right decision. And if you go through an appropriate process to convince yourself, and then you can articulate that same process to someone else, it's likely that either you will achieve buy-in, they will accept your ideas, they will agree with you, or they won't agree with you, and they're going to point out some of the metrics that maybe you should have paid more attention to, or they're going to point to some differences between the scenarios regarding those metrics which you may not have thought about. So it's like it's a way just to let go of the things which you hold dear to your heart and articulate the actual situation. So make a decision.